Hello my loves, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you are new here. Hi, hello, my name is Loey. So today I wanted to read you guys these black-eyed children stories that I found on an article website called Thought Catalog. That's because I just went ahead and filmed a video on some of the scariest urban legends of all time from the internet specifically. And it sort of started off the timeline with black-eyed children back in 1996 all the way to the Momo challenge, which is popular now in 2019. As I was doing a bit of research for that video, I came across this article of some of the scariest real-life stories that people claim to have of encountering black-eyed children. So if you don't already know what a black-eyed child would be, it is a normal human child between the ages of 6 and 16, but with pale skin and completely black eyes. People who have been around black-eyed children report to feel very uneasy about them, very uncomfortable near them. Everything seems normal about them except their black eyes, and yet people just can't seem to stand to be anywhere near them. In some people's accounts of these stories, these children are said to have talents or other demonic attributes, but for the most part, people say they're totally normal. They just have completely blacked out eyes. Now, as I said in my previous video, there are no actual stories from people who have let one of these black-eyed children into their home or have given them what it is that they want. People only have stories when they didn't give these children exactly what it is that they were asking for. And I think that's almost scarier than anything else could possibly be, than even knowing what it is that these black-eyed children do once they have a hold of you. While this urban legend was made popular back in the 90s, yes, in the 1990s, there have still been rises in popularity of black-eyed children. Back in 2014, a British paper even reported that sightings of black-eyed children were rising. People don't know what it is that they are. They might be vampires, they might be demons, they might even be angels. But you should never, ever, under any circumstances, give them what it is that they ask for. Without any further ado, now that you have a brief understanding of black-eyed children, let's get right into these terrifying true stories. This first one is called Midnight Caller. It almost felt like a dream. I woke up to my dog, Lucy, barking. She was upright on the bed where my husband and I were sleeping with our 22-month-old daughter, staring at our door like an unknown stranger was out there rummaging around. I thought she was just freaking out over a house noise. We'd only had her for 3 months and she was still a puppy. It could have been anything. Our roommate, a creak from the house settling, the awnings moving outside in the breeze. I wasn't too concerned initially. I decided that the best bet would be to open the door and show her nothing was there. It sounds a bit silly, but it's what we do with our daughter when she gets scared, and I figured it should work with a puppy too. I opened the door and she raced to the front door. She stood there, snarling at the door. It was an angry, violent growl, one I had never heard her make before. I looked groggily at her and then opened the baby gate blocking the doorway, planning to open the door and show her everything was okay. The second my hand reached for the deadbolt, Lucy went wild. She started barking and jumped towards me, and when I touched the metal, she suddenly changed her temper. She whimpered, almost like she was afraid and backing down. As her mannerism changed, so did mine. I wasn't calm anymore. My heart was racing and sinking at the same time. I had been flooded with a mixture of fear and dread. I looked through the peephole. I can't explain why I looked, but I did. Outside were 2 kids. One was just a smidgen shorter than me and didn't look much younger. I'm 21 and she looked to be about 16 or 17. She was slender and pale. Her hair was a light shade of honey blonde and she wore it long, about mid-back, with long, thin, blunt bangs in the front that covered most of her eyes. She wore jeans, a light wash that's popular right now, and a thin-looking olive-colored pullover style hoodie. She held the hand of a small girl who looked to be about 3 or 4, in the same style jeans and a button-down ivory cardigan. The smaller one looked at the floor shyly, but had the same shade of hair, tied back in a ponytail. She held a stuffed toy under her free arm, and it was identical to the one my daughter has, as was their style of dress. Had it not been for the feeling of overwhelming fear and dread, I probably would have asked these children in and given them some tea or hot chocolate to get them out of the bitter cold. Something about them seemed off. At this point, I hadn't made any noise. I hadn't shushed the dog or grumbled, nothing. I hadn't turned on any lights. These kids had no indicators that I was at the door. The older one spoke. She had a voice that was mature, confident, strong, and accentless. She held her head tilted downwards, and I couldn't see her eyes. She said, "We have to use your phone." I stood frozen in fear. How did she know I was here? She raised her head to face me directly, and that was when I saw her eyes. There was a reason I couldn't see them through her bangs before. They were black, or midnight blue, or a dark, dark purple. They were otherworldly. She said, "Our mother is worried." As someone who's always been interested in creepy stories, I knew what she was the second she looked at me through the door. I have never been one to believe in these things. I'd written off many a ghost story from friends and family members, eager to tell their tale. I didn't believe it. Still, I couldn't rationalize my way out of this. I was standing with nothing but a thin wooden door between me and a black-eyed kid. There was no questioning what was right in front of me. I did not answer her. Slowly and silently, I backed away from the door, Lucy still cowering at my ankles. She kept talking. "Just let us in to use your phone." I took another step back, and with that step, the tone changed. At first, she seemed polite. When I took that second step back, she became commanding, almost hostile. "We're not going to hurt you. If we wanted to do that, we would have broken in. I'll ask again. May we come in and use your phone?" Lucy snarled at the door and I inched backward, though something inside me seemed to be slowly pulling me back towards the door. It wasn't a physical pulling so much as a subconscious need to go back and let them in. I got to my room, covered up the window, locked the door, and sat there in the dim light of the nightlight. I heard her call me back to the door once more, and then quiet. I didn't go back to sleep that night, and I haven't slept right since. I know from reading about black-eyed kids that they can't just come in without permission. I know they haven't hurt anyone, but I still fear that I'll be the exception. When I told my husband, he said it was just a dream. He keeps telling me to forget it, but this lingering feeling of sadness, this dread when the house is silent at night, this fear of a knock at the door, tells me otherwise. Technically, that one was on the no sleep forum, so it's highly likely that that one may have been a fictional story, but the rest of these seem pretty realistic to me. This one is called Bus Encounter. I was riding the bus back home after work. It was about 1 a.m. I'm a security guard and often work odd hours. So I'm sitting there and this guy gets on, sits across from me. He was wearing a suit, had a briefcase, regular looking guy in his 20s. What struck me about him at first was that he was chewing a cigar, not smoking it. You can't smoke on the bus. So I was just looking at him while he stared out the window and chewed on his cigar, and all of a sudden, he turned and looked at me. His eyes were pitch black, just as you described, and I'm assuming that's the original person who had posted about black-eyed children that they were responding to. My heart started beating like a mad person. I was starting to panic and had no idea why. I was just terrified of this guy. Then he grinned at me, and his teeth were all covered in tobacco bits and brown juice. The cigar clamped between them. I almost screamed, but instead I had the presence of mind to just get up and take the seat right behind the driver. I calmed down a bit after that, but kept an eye on the guy. He ended up chatting with some girl that got on, and they were still talking after I got off. I later convinced myself that he was just trolling me, having fun with a pair of contacts. Now, I wonder. That's an interesting story because all of the time we hear about black-eyed children, but not necessarily the black-eyed adults, which, of course, they would grow into if they were children that grew up. This third one is called Halloween. This is so funny. I had never heard of black-eyed kids before my incident, so I come on here to post my story, and the first story I see is about a black-eyed kid. Weird. Let me just preface this by saying I'm by no means a writer, just a domestic engineer living in North Texas. Also, I don't believe in the paranormal, ghosts, demons, aliens, whatever. However, I did have an event happen to me this Halloween, I have to admit, has me scratching my head. This is my first post on Reddit, and I'm sorry to say that I had never even heard about it until yesterday. I told my best friend about my incident, and she's an avid reader of No Sleep and told me if I didn't post it, she would. So here I am. Anyway, hope you like it. So it had been a slow trick-or-treat night in our neighborhood that evening, which is pretty odd in itself. We usually have kids from different areas dropped off in ours and have a constant parade at our door. That night, I'd say we had no more than 8 or 9 groups of kids come by the entire night. It was about 9:30 p.m. and my husband and I were sitting in our family room, watching some of these ghost shows based on, supposedly, actual events. Like I said, I don't believe in that stuff, but I do like a good ghost story now and then. And it was Halloween, after all. We hadn't had any activity at the door in over half an hour, and it was getting late, so we decided to turn the porch light off and let our dog Chloe out of her crate. Chloe's an American Bulldog and is very docile. We only put her in her crate because we were afraid she'd try to get out to play with all the kids, and I didn't want to have to chase her down the street. Also, we didn't want her to scare any of the kids because she would look a little intimidating to the younger ones. So I turned off the outside light, let Chloe out, and she followed me back to my couch and lay down at my feet. It was getting close to 10 p.m. when my husband decided he'd had enough fun for the night and was going to go upstairs, take a shower, and get ready for bed. After all, it was a Thursday, and he still had to get up early the next day. My teenage son was out at his friend's at a local haunted house and wasn't expected back for another hour or so. So that left me alone on the couch with Chloe. Now, just because I don't believe doesn't mean these shows don't freak me out a bit. And being alone now watching, I'd have to say I was kind of on the edge, as it were. It wasn't long after I'd heard the upstairs water come on for the shower when there came a light knock, knock, knock at the front door. My initial reaction was, "Are you serious? What the heck, really? It's 10 p.m., go home." But soon, an uneasy feeling came over me. Why the knock? Our doorbell glows in the dark, and without the porch light, it would be extra obvious to anyone there. I paused. I couldn't really just ignore it. Our front door has a big beveled glass panel, and anybody right at the door could see in enough to see someone was in the family room watching TV. It would be pretty rude for me to just sit there and not answer it. Knock, knock, knock again from the door. I glanced down at Chloe and she was gone. My gaze followed her usual path to the front door, expecting her to be on her way there as she normally does. Nothing. She wasn't there. I stood up to look around the room better and found her, crouching by the back door like she was wanting out. However, she never asks to go out like that. She always comes and licks my hand or puts her head on my knee. This was totally out of character for her, and I have to say, heightened my anxiety. "Chloe, crate," I said. She just looked back to me like, "Heck no, lady, ain't moving." I yelled at my husband, but if he was already in the shower, I knew there was no chance of him hearing me. Knock, knock, knock. About that time, a car drove down our street and cast just enough light to the door where I could see the silhouettes of 2 small children through the glass. I instantly felt relief. It was just some kids, probably a couple of neighbors on their way back home that wanted to stop by and show me their costume or something. I headed to the door and looked back to make sure Chloe wasn't going to follow. What a great watchdog, I thought to myself as she just sat there. I turned on the porch light when I got to the door, and sure enough, I could see through the glass that it was just a couple of pretty small kids. A little late for such young ones, I thought, and I began to wonder about what kind of parents would let their kids run the streets that late at night. I only opened the door enough to where I could block Chloe's escape if she decided to grow some balls, which was only about 2 feet. What struck me immediately as odd was the kids weren't wearing any costumes. They were normal street clothes. Also, no customary trick-or-treat either. I began to feel very uneasy again. It was a girl and a boy. The girl to my left was older. I'd say about 11 or 12. I could tell she was blonde, but I couldn't make out any distinct features as our lights are from high above and on columns at the front of the porch, so most of the light was coming from behind them. I had not opened the door wide enough for any light from inside to hit them directly. The boy was younger and about a foot shorter, I'd say 8 or 9, and looked to have light brown hair. The girl very politely spoke up. "Ma'am, can we please come inside and use your phone to call our mom?" As she spoke, something in the pit of my stomach was telling me something was wrong. What kid, even at that age, doesn't have a cell phone of their own these days? I couldn't remember the last time I'd had anybody ask to use my home phone. Hun, don't you have a phone of your own that you can call your mom on?" I asked. This was where things got really weird. Both kids turned to look at each other like they were going to say something to one another, but they never spoke. They both turned back to me and the girl said, "Ma'am, my cell phone battery doesn't have any charge left in it. Can we please come inside and call our mother? We're out alone here and my brother is scared." I have to admit there were two competing feelings going on inside me. The first, that of a mother's heart that wanted to help these two small children get to their mom. The other, a sinking fear in my gut that was keeping the other feeling at bay. It was then that I noticed that during the short conversation, I'd already opened the door a few extra inches, which I was completely unaware of doing. I stopped. "Honey, why don't you give me your mother's number and I can call her myself?" Another pause, and they again looked at one another. After a short moment, they turned back to me and the girl said, "Ma'am, my little brother has to use your bathroom. Can we please come inside while you call our mom?" And with that last statement, the little girl moved closer towards the door like she was going to just walk on in by me. And she did. She stepped into the light coming from inside the house and I got my first real good look at her. Solid jet black eyes. That's all I could see. That motherly instinct was gone and replaced by terror I don't think I've ever felt in my life. I could feel every hair on my arms and back of my neck standing at attention. I closed the door to where just my face was able to stick out. The little girl stopped again and pleaded, "Please, ma'am, we're really scared and alone out here. We have to come inside. Please help us." Then, like on cue, both kids began to whimper and cry. That's when the fear took over and I shut and locked the door. "I'll call your mom if you give me the number," I shouted through the door, "but I'm not letting you in my house." I could still see them on the porch, just staring at me through the beveled glass pane. Part of me wanted to run upstairs to my husband, but the bigger part didn't want to lose track of where they were. That would have freaked me out even more, not to know where they were. After what seemed like forever, but probably only a few seconds, I decided I'd call my neighbor that lived across the street. As I made my way to the side table by our couch to my phone, I glanced at the back door. Chloe was nowhere to be found. We later found her in the guest room under the bed. When I got to my phone and started to look for his contact info, it was only then that the kids stepped away from the door and began to walk to the street. As they did, I walked to the door to get a better look, to see where they went, still not calling my neighbor. If you get close enough to the glass, you can still see out enough to make out people's shapes, but you can't see much detail. Of course, standing that close to the door would make you pretty obvious to anyone outside looking in. From the door, I could see that the kids were still standing under the street lamp nearest my house, staring at me. I met my neighbor out under the lamp once he was out there, but the kids were nowhere to be seen. Like I said, I don't believe in any of this stuff, and I had never even heard about black-eyed kids before talking to my friend. What I really think, what I have to think, is these kids were just out yanking people's chains on Halloween night. But I will say this for them. They were good. Really good at it. They scared the heck out of me and my dog. That one was super long and super creepy. And I can't imagine how I would feel if I was in that woman's place. And I think we have time for just one more. And this one is called You Must Let Me In. On March 17th, 2008, I had my one and only encounter with a black-eyed kid. Before having my experience, I had never heard of anything having to do with the black-eyed kids. I was 12. I was sitting outside of a hairdresser's in an old Chevy pickup, waiting for my mom to get her hair cut. About 15 minutes had passed and I saw some kid walking back and forth along the sidewalk in front of my parked car. At first I thought I recognized him as one of my friends from school, so I banged on the front windshield until he looked my way. It was not anyone I knew. At this point I was not scared at all. Not yet. This boy walked to the side of my car and just stared. Let me tell you, if you have never seen a black-eyed kid, you have no idea what to imagine. Pupils as black as the night sky. The boy whispers, "You must let me in." And then I locked the car doors and ducked down into the space below the seats. 5 minutes later, he was gone. When my mother got into the car, she told me a boy with black eyes had come into the hairdresser's and insisted for my mother to give him the keys to the car. She refused. Thank God she did. You guys know that most of the time when I find stories like this, I really like to react to them with you guys, and I had no idea how long these stories were. So if you guys want me to do a part 2 to this, I am happy to continue it in the future. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I love you all so very much, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.